to the cloud. All right, ladies. So I want to first start off by just letting you look at your the blood tube papers, as I call it. The actual title of the forms are Laboratory Tube Collection Quick Reference Guide. Okay, so you notice that all the blood tubes is on here. And I know that you already noticed the royal blue that's on the second page. Royal blue is not a part of the order of draw, and it's for special lab testing in the lab. So I don't want to go over, I never go over the royal blue. If you want to take the initiative and just look over the royal blue, you can, but you're not going to be tested on it right now, and it's not a part of the order of draw. So I don't want to put too much on you that I know that it's not going to be needed. But there is a such thing as a royal blue tube. There is a such thing as a yellow tube. It is a such thing as a black tube, as a tan tube, all those things. But you will learn about those things later once you start working in a full-blown outpatient lab or a hospital. Okay, and remember, they will train you on that. You can use notes. You can grab on orientation, bring your pen and your paper, take notes. Because the whole art of, once you pass your certification, the whole art of phlebotomy is being confident in blood drawing. I wouldn't even worry about right now being concerned about, oh, what's the royal blue for? What's the tan for? You'll learn that later. It's really not important, okay? Because once you learn it, it's just gonna be something that adds on to what you already know, okay? So without further ado, I want to talk about the order of draw. Remember, it's very important to go in the order of draw. What is the order of draw? The order of draw is because we have blood tubes that's of different color, and the additive, the ingredient that's inside the tube is very important. For example, citrate, the serum SST tubes, heparin, EDTA, oxalate, all of those are ingredients that are in the tubes. And those are why we have to go in the order of draw, because if you go out of the order of draw, you will be mixing the additives in the blood, and that can cause an abnormal result no matter if they're low or high. It's still abnormal. You can cause that in your patient, and it can cause the patient to be misdiagnosed. I did send you all a YouTube video Tuesday. It was about, just at 3 minutes, about the 10 most common mistakes in phlebotomy. I hope you watch that, because it is very important to know, because you may get a question that actually talks about one of those mistakes, and you will know that either it's something you do or something you don't do, okay? So I hope that you did review that video. If you didn't, please be sure to review it, and you can always go back and click that link to review over and over, okay? So without further ado, we do know that we make sure that we label our tubes. When the patient is holding pressure, we invert our tubes, and then we put the label on our tube. Remember, we always put the label on our tube long ways on the clear side of the tube, not over the original label on the tube. At the bottom of your second page, just like here on my screen, it tells you everything that's on the label. Typically, in real life, the label is already pre-populated and pre-printed, so all of this information will be on there. The only thing that you would have to make sure you write on that label is your initials, not your first and last full government name, just your initials, today's date and the time, okay? It is very important to have that on there. That's not going to be pre-printed, because those labels can print in the morning and you don't draw the blood until the evening, okay? So please take heed to how you label what's on your label. It will be on the exam. In your folder, I did give you 4 papers that were stapled together. I believe the first one talks about safety. The second one talks about the requisition. The third one actually talks about venipuncture, and the fourth one talks about labeling. So be sure as we're going over these things, because we're already after this weekend, well, really right now we're halfway, okay? I don't want to rush you. I just want to be sure that you're getting the knowledge in the most efficient way. Remember, afterwards, we will spend time one-on-one on things that you just need verification over, okay? But the just bulk of the knowledge you need to be getting now, okay? So that is your labeling. Now I want to go ahead and go into the order of draw. Remember, the first thing in the order of draw, if the doctor orders it, will be your blood cultures. On some of your papers, it may say sterile. On some of your papers, it may have two little bitty circles. Just know that if I ask you what's first in the order of draw, I want you to tell me the blood cultures if the doctor's ordering. So the reason why I keep stressing that is because I get so many students that get confused. And if I give you solutions, if I give you a question and I ask you what is the correct order of draw in blood cultures is not in neither of the choices, please don't let that, I think I've mentioned this already once or twice, please don't let that confuse you. It's just a question. So therefore, if it does not give you that in answers, that must mean the doctor didn't order it. So according to the options you have to choose what is correct in the order of draw, okay? So right here, first thing is first. Remember, I also had you to take pictures in class. So I want to focus on the blood cultures. I have blood cultures. As you can see, I have these very same brand blood cultures in class. Some of you may have had this particular brand, but we're not going to focus on the brand. But remember, those blood culture bottles have fluid, liquid in it, and that is their additive, okay? Remember, one bottle is of an anaerobic. Let me make it bigger. So on my picture, the blue labeling is aerobic. The pink labeling is anaerobic. Remember, aerobic is once the blood is in that bottle and it has to sit in that bottle, that bacteria is growing without oxygen. Anaerobic means that that bacteria will be growing in that blood without oxygen, okay? So you see I have a little flashcard type style for my blood cultures. Aerobic is the additive in that bottle, okay? Hold on, something is moving. Stop following. Okay. All right, so aerobic is with oxygen. Anaerobic is without oxygen, okay? If you look at your picture, or if you can visualize your picture you took in class, or if you can visualize it, if you can really see my bottles real good on my whiteboard, did you notice that they were measurements on those bottles to tell you how much additive was in those bottles? One bottle could have been 30 milliliters of additive in there. The other bottle could have been 40 milliliters of additive in there. So I'm increasing my screen because I want you to see, you can definitely see it on the pink label, on the anaerobic bottle. You see off to the side, it has 5 milliliters, 5 milliliters, 5 milliliters, blah, 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 5 milliliters. So on the front of that bottle, it doesn't show on my picture because of how the bottles are positioned, but these bottles have 30 milliliters of fluid in these bottles. And typically, if you look at this anaerobic bottle, you see that that fluid goes all the way up to where the pink stops on that label, okay? So in other words, that label will tell us it's 30 milliliters of fluid in here, okay? So you're probably thinking, how in the world are we going to draw the blood? And how much blood are we supposed to put in these bottles from my patient? So typically, and I will show you this weekend, if you have orders for blood culture, no matter if the patient's veins are big and nice and juicy, you would draw that patient's blood with a butterfly. because the end of the butterfly that you stick it in the bottle and blood would just flow in the bottle. Okay, so what it is that you need to put at least 10 milliliters of blood in each bottle. So for example, if you look at the measurement again, where it says 5 milliliter, but that whole bottle right now has 30 milliliters. When the blood is going in the bottle, that level of that fluid is going to increase. So it's going to increase up to the next 5 milliliters. Then it's going to increase up to the next 5 milliliters. That's when you stop, because 5 plus 5 is 10. So that bottle started off with 30 milliliters of additive. And when you added the 10 milliliters of blood, it made it 40. Basically, the liquid turned to 40. But the levels rised once the blood got in there. You would take the needle out, puncture the other bottle, and also do the same thing. So 10 milliliters of blood goes in each bottle. So already from collecting blood cultures, you've taken 20 milliliters of blood from your patient, which is nothing, but it requires more than a blood tube. If you remember when I had you look at the labels of your blood tube, most of the blood tubes was like 2.5 milliliters or 3.0 milliliters. I know my long red ones, I think, said 6 milliliters. So when you think of that, that's how much one blood tube may have, just 4 milliliters, but you're putting 10 milliliters in each bottle, okay? It's not gonna harm the patient at all, okay? I will demonstrate it in class on this weekend on Saturday, but I just wanna let you know that's how it's collected with a butterfly needle. Once you actually put blood in the aerobic bottle and the anaerobic bottle, without moving the needle, you're still working. Then you start getting your blood tubes that's next in the order of draw, according to what the doctor ordered. Okay? So you're using the butterfly throughout the whole process. Remember, it's for multi-sample needles. So, and multi-sample blood tubes. So let me just also explain it to you this way. Just imagine when you take your needle and you screw on the vacutainer holder. Remember, that part is a needle and it is covered in a gray rubber covering. Well, remember, on the butterfly, it also has that end with that rubber covering. That's the rubber covering because it's a needle. You just stick that in the bottle, and I'll show you this weekend. So what I'm saying is there's no holder for most of the blood culture bottles. And it'll make more sense, you know, because the bottles are big. They don't have holders like the blood culture tubes do. But then you would have to, with one hand, attach your blood tube holder for your blood tubes. I know it may sound like a lot, but trust me, I'm gonna explain it in person. It's not a lot. But collecting blood cultures is a part of special collections because you collect it in a different way because they're bottles. And it's really not that much of a difference. You're just using the butterfly. That's it. Okay, so you do need to know that 10 milliliters of blood goes into each bottle. You'll know when you hit that mark because the levels will be rising. And once it rolls to the second 5 milliliters, then you do your next bottle and the same thing, okay? That's why it's measured like that. Back to the blood cultures. I wanna let you know that when the doctor is sending off for blood cultures, you should already know that the culture part is going to let the doctor know what is the name of the bacteria growing in that blood. And then remember, the sensitivity portion lets the doctor know what antibiotics is going to treat that patient. So let me tell you why there's 2 bottles, one with oxygen, one without. My whiteboard here says blood cultures are to check for septicemia and bacteremia. It talks about this in your book on page 146 and 147, okay? You can still feel free to screenshot the whiteboard at any time. Now, what septicemia and bacteremia means is that this patient could really be sick. That's why the doctor is even doing blood cultures. Septicemia checks for if the bacteria or the infection is reaching your organs. Versus bacteremia is letting the doctor know that if you have an infection, bacteria in your blood. So both of them is in your bloodstream, but septicemia is basically, I don't want to use the word worse, but it can mean that, you know, the patient is in more danger because not only is the bacteria flowing through the blood, but he or she may have had that infection for so long or had a bad infection to where it's starting to mess with a organ. And when I mean by organ, I mean a kidney, a liver, the heart, things like that. So that's why it's very important to be sure that people get treated for infections. Back in the day, you know, our grandparents, our parents, they may not have been those type, and you probably still have people like that now. They may not have been those type that go to the doctor like, oh no, my body is gonna, you know, my body is gonna heal itself. I'm gonna sweat out that fever. Some people, it does work depending on people's immunity, but typically when a patient has a fever that is not good, it's already letting you know that you have. I've never seen a case where someone has a blood bacteria in the blood, an infection in the blood, and never run a fever. They always have to run a fever because that's the body's way of telling a person that something is wrong. Now, don't let me confuse you. Someone can run a fever and then their body fought it off, like just battling. They was fighting each other. And finally, you won the battle because no more fever. The fever has gone away. So in other words, if someone has a fever and it is not treatable, you've been taking Tylenol and Motrin for the last 2 to 3 days, and the fever is not going away, it may come back, it may go away, come back. And the more that it gets worse, it may go away and not stay that long. It may just go away for an hour and come right back. Someone needs to be checked out, okay? That fever is our body's way of telling us something is wrong. Can your body fight it off? Yes, but typically if it's been over 3 days, it's getting worse, okay? So that's when the doctor will order blood cultures. That could be the only thing that you are exhibiting is a fever. So he's like, oh my God, what's wrong? They are going to run blood cultures, okay? The doctor is checking for septicemia and bacteremia. I need you to know that, and I need you to remember that. So when you are making flashcards for your auto draw, when you're doing it with the blood cultures, you need to have aerobic, okay, with oxygen. You need to have anaerobic without oxygen. But the doctor is checking for septicemia and bacteremia. It needs to be on both cards, okay? Remember, any culture of any kind, urine, blood, poop, saliva, drainage from a wound, when it is a culture, the results are going to take up to 2 days to come back because those cultures has to grow. The bacteria, it has to stay in, you know, in those specimen containers, and it has to grow. That's the only way the doctors and the chemists and the scientists knows, you know, what the bacteria is. It has to grow. Routine, regular blood works, once it's sent off to the lab and resulted, it typically takes 4 to 6 hours to come back. Now, if your doctor office tell you, oh, it'll take 2 weeks, we'll call you in 2 weeks. Really, it takes the same day. But because of how they're working, that's why a lot of times, if anything is abnormal, they're calling you with the abnormals, but you don't hear nothing when it's normal. Okay. So back blood cultures, first in the order of draw, you always need 2 bottles, aerobic, anaerobic. The doctor is checking for septicemia and bacteremia in your blood, okay? It takes 24, it takes 24, 1 to 2 days for the bacteria to grow, okay? You put 10 milliliters of blood in each bottle from your patient. Remember, All cultures of any bodily fluid goes to the microbiology department in the lab. Okay, please remember that. Any questions over blood cultures? I'm moving on to the next. Okay. That's my ice maker making all that noise. I don't have an ice maker in my refrigerator, so I have a portable, one of those. My mother bought that for me for my housewarming. All right, so now next in the order draw number 2, we have our light blue top tube. When you're looking at your paper, the same paper that I'm showing you, you see that it has one that is a solid light blue. Then it has another one that's like clear and blue. They're both still citrate tubes. Remember, in the real world, look at your labels. I always tell my students, look at the equipment and the supplies that your facility is going to have. Get acquainted to it, because they can start using different brands. Time be changing. Other companies come out with bigger and better things. So just get used to reading the label, okay? So that's the same tube. Remember, when we looked at that blue tube, it had some type of clear solution in it. We know now that that is the additive that lies in that tube. We also know now that that additive is named citrate, sodium citrate, but you can remember it by citrate. Okay. So light blue top tube, second in the order of draw. Citrate is the additive that's in that tube. Next, you see on your paper, I want you to highlight it, circle it, or whatever. It says 3 to 4 tube inversions to ensure proper mixing of the anticoagulant with the blood. I'm going to explain to you what coagulant and anticoagulant means. The prefix anti was on your quiz, by the way. So hopefully you know that that means without, okay? No, against, but we'll talk about it. So that light blue top tube, that citrate tube is inverted three to 4 times once you're done drawing blood. Do you also see in the next box on your paper, it says no clotting time required. So that means long as you draw blood the correct way and it flows in the tube as it should, I don't care if that tube sat for 6 hours in your lab, that blood is not going to clot, because that citrate is made with but that citrate is made with ingredients that is not made for the blood to ever clot in that tube. Okay. Second in the order draw, citrate is the additive. We invert it 3 to 4 times. Next, on the areas where it says most common lab tests, this is what I want you to circle. There is 1, 2, 3, 4 most common tests here on your paper. I want you to circle or highlight the first 2. So I want you to circle PTINR. I want you to circle PTT. Those are the most common tests that the doctor will order for a patient that requires you to use the light blue top citrate tube. If you also have your requisition out like I recommended, you would find that I have checked PT with INR. And as I introduced to you all last weekend, when you take your finger and just move it over to the right, there is the letter B for blue. So it's telling you that it goes in your blue tube, okay? The most common test is PT with INR, PTT, PT, all the PTTs, okay? PT-INR is really two separate tests. That's why on your requisition, it says PT with INR. So that's what this means. So basically, it could be a PT test or an INR test or a PTT test, but there is a such thing as ordering a PT test with INR, okay? So that's what that is. I want you to remember that it's going to be on your national exam. So the more you keep studying and you see PT, you see INR, PTT, hopefully you'll begin to know, oh, that's my blue top tube. Them two. Now, let me bring my whiteboard to my flashcard that I made. I'm making it bigger. So you could probably screenshot this too, because besides the blood cultures, this is a good screen with the flashcards that I made. So I want to just talk about the light blue tube section. So you see, so just imagine that I took a flashcard, you know, one of them index cards. Let's just say for me, on the front of the card, I basically divided it up. I wrote a big cross on there to divide it up to make it 4 small boxes, if that makes sense. So just imagine that's how I did my flashcards here on the whiteboard. The front of the flashcard, and I just made 4 boxes. Drew a line down the middle horizontally and drew a line vertically. So on one of the boxes, I put light blue to represent the color of the tube. Next to it, I put sodium citrate to represent the additive that's in that tube. The third box, I wrote how many times to invert it. You see here, I put 3 to 5 times, but on your paper it says 3 to 4. It doesn't matter, 3 to 4, 3 to 5. They're going to be represented in the same way. If you ever give it, you will be. But if you see a question and it asks you how many times to invert your light blue top tube, it will never give you the same. It will never be one answer choice, 3 to 4 and 1 through to 5. It's either going to be 3 to 4 or 3 to 5. I just want you to know that you would choose 3 to 4, 3 to 5, whichever one is the answer, but it's never going to be both of them. So in your mind, just think of 3 to 5. Therefore, that 4 can just be in the middle, okay? And then that 4th box on my flashcard, I have the most common tests I just told you about, which is PT-INR and PTT. That is my flashcard for my light blue top tube. But let me add something. You remember that I explained to you all when you're interviewing your patient, you need to ask them if they're fasting. You need to ask them, have they ever had any complications before? You need to ask them what arm or hand, or, you know, what do they prefer? At what area do they prefer you to stick, you know, to look first to stick. And then that last question is, do you know if you're on any blood thinners? Okay, because that's going to let you know that that patient could excessively bleed because they're on blood thinners. So just giving you a little cheat note. If you find yourself picking up a blue top tube because the doctor has ordered a PT with INR or PTT, that is already telling us that the patient is on a blood thinner. And all you need to know is just to be sure that that hemostasis has been created before the patient leaves, okay? So PT-INR is a blood test that measures how thick or thin somebody's blood is. And the doctor will frequently order that because they are probably on blood thinners, and the doctor is trying to find a therapeutic range for the patient's blood. Our blood, because of hemostasis, our blood has a natural way of clotting so we can stop bleeding, okay? So if we excessively bleed and we don't never stop bleeding, meaning our body isn't doing the natural clotting it's supposed to do, then that can be detrimental to us, okay, or to your patient, okay? But it is a possibility for someone's blood to be too thick to where they won't bleed. So then that is what makes the doctor put the patient on blood thinners and have them come in probably every month to do a PT-INR or a PTT to make sure their levels are good. Okay. People with strokes, that has had a stroke, people that has had a heart attack, a lot of those things is from the blood and blood clots forming to where, you know, it's not good for them. So the doctor put them on a blood thinner. I still get cases to where some of the older people, you know, are used to taking baby aspirin every day because they were told in their younger years that an aspirin a day keeps the blood nice to prevent heart attacks. And there are still people that do that to this day. And some doctors prescribe it to older people. So if someone ever told you that they weren't on aspirin, then that is considered a blood thinner. But I'll explain to you later what, you know, to be familiar with other blood thinner names, but that's not important as to getting accustomed to the order of draw. Okay, so this is our flashcard for our second order of draw, which is our light blue top tube. Our sodium citrate is the additive that's in there. We invert it 3 to 5 times gently in a figure-8 motion from side to side. And the most common test that you will see that the doctor will order is a PT-INR and PTT. Okay. Any questions regarding our light blue top tube? Okay. All right. So now I want to go over to our blood tube paper that has our red and gold on there, because guess what? Our red is next in the order of draw, number 3. I know we all remember Alicia introducing to us a better way to help us remember are the triplets. Remember, red is first. As you see on your blood tube paper, red does not have any additive in it. So therefore, there's no inversions, okay? But then remember, the children to the red, or the triplets as I call it, as you called it, which is the marble tube or the tiger top, whichever one you want to remember it by. And then we have the gold tube. Remember, you took pictures of it. Those tubes have like a light orange gel in it. That is the additive, and that is called SST. You read the label to me. When you go over to the next box, it tells you that those tubes are clot activator tubes. And the gel that's in there is made for serum separation. So if you haven't already, I want you to write SST, and I want you to write serum separation tube. That's what SST stands for. And that's what the name of that gel is. It's a gel, but they call it SST. And as it tells you, it's to separate the blood. So remember, the triplets are serum tubes. It's just that the red doesn't have an additive, but the marble and the gold has an additive, which is that gel substance. And it is serum separation tube. SST is the gel, okay? It's the additive. Right underneath that, do you see how many times it says to invert those tubes? It says 5 tube inversions is required to ensure mixing of clot activator with blood. When you look over to the next box, it says it needs clotting time of 30 minutes. I will explain that to you because in class, when we get real blood, you will be able to see the blood when it came into the tube initially when you drew the blood. And when we put it in the centrifuge machine, that centrifuge machine is the buttons, you press the buttons for a certain amount of time and the speed, and it spins it so fast to where it separates the blood, and then it'll be ready to be taken to the lab so the scientists and the medical directors can do what they do with resulting the blood. So just to give you insight, only the triplets requires to sit and clot, and you're going to see that in person. So if you were to draw blood in your red top tube that has no additive, you have to let it sit for 60 minutes so it can clot. If you use your marble top or your gold top tube, which is what I told you, what we recommend you to do when you're using your serum tubes, they only need 30 minutes to sit to clot because it has that gel in there. So it has to clot first. It has to. Your triplets, your serum tubes is only 3, which is why Alicia named them triplets. Okay. So you do not invert the red plain tube, but you do invert the marble top tube and the gold top tube 5 times. Okay. Now, I need you to get that pen, that highlighter, whatever it is that you're using, and I want to tell you what is the most that the doctor will order in these tubes. It is 4 of them, so it's a little bit more lengthy, but that first box that says chemistry profile, I want you to circle it. It says chemistry profiles. The next box I want you to circle, it says lipid panel. LIPID panel. Next, I want you to circle next door to it, hepatic panel. It's right next door to lipid panel. HEPATIC panel. So you should have highlighted 3 areas or circled 3 areas. Now I want you to go back to that chemistry profile, and above it, I want you to write CMP, and underneath that, I want you to write BMP. Before I show my flashcard, I want you to do a little bit of writing so it'll be filled in already. So above chemistry profile, you wrote CMP and BMP. Going over to lipid panel, above it, I want you to write cholesterol above it. And you're probably like, oh Lord, how to spell cholesterol. Remember, I told you I'm not big on spelling, but you do need to be familiarized with the word. So cholesterol, CHOLESTEROL, cholesterol. Oh, I think I misspelled it anyway. CHOLESTEROL. The reason why I'm having you write cholesterol because another name for lipid is cholesterol. So basically, that's why it's the most common test. Every time we go for our physicals, everybody is getting a lipid panel. The doctor has to check your cholesterol. Next to lipid panel, I had you circle or highlight hepatic panel. Above hepatic, I want you to write liver, LIVER. Hepatic is a medical terminology name for liver. I know that the doctors do not order a liver panel on everybody, but it is a common test. And in is going to be sure that you are aware of it, and it will be a test that they give you or have you be tested. And hopefully you know that if you see hepatic panel, lipid panel, or CMP, BMP, it goes in your SST tubes, in your serum tubes. Let me go to my flashcard and show you what I wrote down or typed. So this is my flashcard for my serum triplet tubes. I did the same thing, took a line, went straight down the middle, vertical and horizontally. So I made 4 boxes on that flashcard. The first box, I put red, then I put none, because to me, it represents no additive. Then on the side of none, I wrote serum, because that red top tube is a serum tube. Then I just kind of added some things so I can remember that that the serum tubes in general, the triplets, they are clot activator tubes. They are made to sit and clot before processing. Okay. The second box, I put gold on the side of it. I put SST. Then I put tiger and I put SST. Next to it, I put serum separator tube so I can remember what the SST stands for, which we should know now. It's the gel that's in those tubes, but it's called SST. I put 5 times to invert those SST tubes, 5 times. In that fourth box, the test that I had you all circle, chemistry profile, I had you write CMP and BMP. You see here on my flashcard, I just went on ahead and wrote out the whole word, what CMP and BMP stands for. The doctor is checking your chemistries, but he can either do a complete panel or a basic panel. And most doctors just do a complete. This, I'm going to show you in person, like I showed you with the urine, what the results look like. This is how the CMP and BMP is how the doctor knows if you're dehydrated. This is how the doctor knows if your kidney functions is kind of abnormal, that makes them do other kidney tests. This is how the doctor knows your electrolytes is off balance. That's what makes us dehydrated. So our potassium, our sodium, our magnesium, all of those good, words, all of those is electrolytes. And if they are low, we are starting to enter into dehydration, okay? And that is how the doctor knows from a CMP and a BMP. That is why on every physical that you get, the doctor will do it. If y'all go for your physicals routinely, or the last time you went for your physicals and they did the blood work, if you have an online portal to see your results, print them out, look at them. I'm telling you, okay? Also, it has your glucose level just in general within that CMP, okay? So it has your glucose and all your electrolytes and your kidney functions in that test. That's why it is very common and a most important test. And the reason why it's called a panel, I want to let y'all know. You see how I just mentioned all those tests: glucose, potassium, magnesium, sodium, kidney function tests. It's a series of tests all in one. So that's why it's called a panel. It's a panel of tests made under one main test, if that makes sense. That's what makes it a panel. Next, I put hepatic and I put liver in parentheses, so I can remember that the word hepatic means liver. Next, I put lipid panel and I put cholesterol in parentheses to let me know that lipid stands for cholesterol. I know that I had you circle 3 tests on your paper: chemistry profile, hepatic panel, and lipid panel. But then when I broke it down, it's kind of like it's 4. But that CMP, BMP is really the same test. It's just one is a basic panel, so it doesn't have, all the tests that a complete has. But if you see it checked on your requisition, I just need you to know that it is a SST, a serum tube test, these 4, okay? So I don't want you to be confused by the serum tubes at all, because you've just been introduced to more information. We know that it's third in the order of draw. We know that it's 3 tubes because they're the triplets. Now we know that they're supposed to clot, okay? Now we know that we invert at least the SST tubes 5 times, because the solid red tube doesn't have an additive. And we just use those for extra tubes most of the time, okay? And we also know that our common test to remember is CMP, lipid panel, and hepatic panel, and along with a BMP, okay? I try to explaining what the tests are is really over teaching. You don't have to know that, but I can't leave that out because I feel like it's a part of learning. That way you will know why it's the most common test the doctor is doing, okay? The test is not going to ask you, okay, what is a CBC? What is, as far as what is in those tests? But you do need to know that if he says, as a phlebotomy technician, which of the following lab tests will you use for a serum or SST tube? And hopefully you'll be able to depict what test. Okay, now it's one of those 4. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and go back to our paper, because now we're on the 4th order of draw. All right, so 4th in the order of draw, ladies, is our green tubes. No matter if it's dark green or light green. Remember, it could be 2 years from now and you forget. You see these both 2 green tubes, one dark, one light. You like, oh my God, I forgot about these tubes. Look at the label, pick both of them up, look at the label. Then you're going to be reminded like, oh, they both lithium heparin tubes, okay? It is 4th in the order of draw. Heparin is the additive. Now, if you remember and you look at the picture you took with your phone in class, the green, and I have nothing but light greens in class, but you saw that green also have a gel in it. But that gel is made with different ingredients from the SST gel. This ingredient is heparin. That's what that gel is. Ooh, you see, you invert these tubes 8 times. 8 tube inversions to ensure mixing of anticoagulant with blood to prevent blood clotting. And you see off to the side, it says no clotting time required, like that blue top tube. So that means after you draw my blood, and if it sits in that tube for a couple of hours, it is going to clot. It's not going to clot. That means that the additive of heparin, whatever ingredients in there, when it mixes with the blood, it's not made to clot. So the blood will still flow freely. It's not going to clot. Okay. Now, I don't want to confuse you about this. Hopefully it is, it'll be easy for you to remember. But when you look at the most common tests, do you see highlighted in yellow, it says preferred for all stats, general chemistry request. There goes that word stat again. That means ASAP, immediately, right now. Do you also see some of the same tests? Chemistry profile, lipid panel, hepatic panel, what we just talked about. So let me tell you, if these tests that I just mentioned, CMP, BMP, lipid panel, hepatic panel, if they're checked on your requisition and the doctor wrote stat on the order and it's on that requisition, that means, I don't want to confuse you, that means do not pick up the SST tubes. You would pick up the green tube because those tests were ordered stat. So the only way that I can get you to remember it better is that if you're picking up a green top tube, everything that goes in that green top tube is stat. But only the same tests that go in your serum triplet tubes, if they're ordered stat, they go in your green top tube, not the other tubes. Just whatever goes in the serum tubes. If the doctor ordered those lab tests stat, that goes in your green top tube. So remember the green as stat labs for, if somebody think of a better way for you to remember it, I don't want to confuse you, because you can also write if the test that's ordered in your serum tubes, if they are ordered stat, you do not at all pick up your serum tubes. You draw your green. You don't do both. You just do the green because the doctor ordered that stat. And those tests needs to be resulted stat, and it can only be resulted when it's mixed with heparin, the additive. So I don't want to explain it in a different way because I don't want to explain it different and confuse you more. So in other words, the most common tests that go in that light green top tube are the same for your SST tube. It's just that in this case, they were ordered stat. So if you can imagine, because I did not write stat on anybody's requisition, but on your requisition, all of your blood tubes that, the lab test that I checked, that has an S for serum, if the doctor ordered that stat, that S will then be your heparin tube. You just have to know that you need to pick up your heparin tube, if that makes sense. I hope that explained okay, because every class I think about y'all as an individual. So it's kind of like I explain it the same, but I try to explain it differently according to, the class that I already spent a weekend with. So I kind of feel like I know how everybody learn or interpret it. Some catch on fast, some need a little bit more explanation. Besides the chemistry profile, lipid panels, and the hepatic panel, I also want you to circle where it says ammonia on ice. We will talk about that over special collections. But if the doctor orders an ammonia, it does go on the green top tube. But what's so special about it is that you see it says on ice. So I need to just get you to, I need to just lecture you on those. It's blood samples that it's a special collection. You draw the blood and everything the same way. You just have to watch how you process some things. And this ammonia has to be cold. So the moment you draw my ammonia level, it needs to go on ice, or it needs to have an ice pack. It needs to be basically chilled when it goes to the lab. Otherwise, it will damage the sample, and they will not be able to result it correctly. Okay. So that green top tube is fourth in the order of draw. Heparin is the additive. Okay. We invert this tube 8 times. The most common test to go in, and then it's not a clotting tube. It won't clot. The blood will not clot in the tube. And the most common tests to remember are your CMPs, your BMPs, your liver panel and hepatic panel. mean, in your, yeah, lipid panel, hepatic panel, it's just that they're ordered stacked in this case. So when you look at my flashcard, I know it's just going the other way, but it's still divided up to where 4 squares is there. I have green, no matter if it's light or dark. Heparin, it's a gel, but that's my additive. I invert this tube 8 times. And off to the side on my fourth box, I have any labs that is ordered stat, CMP, BMP, hepatic panel, lipid panel. And then down here, I have ammonia on ice. Don't worry about the therapeutic drug monitoring because they took that out of the test plan. So that's why I have it separated. I mean, therapeutic drug monitoring goes in that too, but you don't have to, focus on remembering it because they took it out the test plan, so to speak. We get updates on the test plan of the subjects and areas they go over. So green means you need to be on go. Come on now. Yes. So Alicia said, always stat. That's it. You have a good, I like how you think of these things, because even me, I have, it takes me a minute to think of something that I'm gonna easily remember. So Alicia said that for the green, she's gonna remember, if I pick up a green top tube, I need to be on the go because those blood samples are stat. I need to move. Green for go. Okay. Yep. Good job. All right. Let's move forward. Let's go to our next tube. So now we're on the 5th order draw. And like I said, ladies, if you go to a plasma center first, they do not do the order draw because they're not a lab for blood samples for, the doctor. It's a donation center, okay? So, but when you take your certification exam, you are proving that you are knowledgeable in all areas of the fundamentals of phlebotomy. So that's why the exam has all of the stuff on here, okay? All right, so 5th in the order draw is our purple tube. Remember, some of the tubes look more purple and some of the tubes look like a lavender. They're the same EDTA tube. Make sure you look at that label. So on that purple and lavender top tube, the additive that's in those are K2-EDTA. You can remember it by EDTA. And remember, we read it. It's spray coated in that tube. That's why it looks like it's moist, like just like sweaty or something, okay? Look at that. We invert this tube 8 times too. What? And then it says no clotting time required. So yet again, when blood gets in this tube, the blood will not clot. So whatever ingredient is in that EDTA tube is made to where the blood will not clot in that tube, okay? Now, let's talk about the most common test to remember in this blue top tube. I'm sorry, in this purple top tube. I want you to circle the first box. It says CBC. You can circle the whole thing, but I want you to focus on CBC, honestly. So I want you to circle CBC. Then I want you to circle SED rate. SED rate is actually short for the real word. It's like sedimentation, something like that. But SED rate is what I want you to circle. Then next, the last box, it says HGB A1C. It stands for hemoglobin A1C, but I want you to circle it. Okay, so let me explain to you. I'm gonna start with the hemoglobin A1C, HGB-A1C. If you have your requisition out, I also checked it. Every single blood test that I'm going over is checked on your requisition. So when you find HGB-A1C, or it could say hemoglobin A1C. The reason why this is a most common test because If you are a diabetic or your loved one is a diabetic, the doctor runs this test every 3 months to check your hemoglobin A1C levels to see if your diabetes is being maintenance. They can tell if you've been taking your medication over an extended period of time because your level is normal. It's different from having just your glucose checked that day and given a glucose level to see how much sugar is in your body that day. But a hemoglobin A1C is a level it gives the doctor over a period of time. Okay, so no, not everyone is a diabetic, but the reason why it's a common test, because if the person is a diabetic, the doctor will draw this. Okay, we'll order this, I mean. Going back to the front one where it says CBC, I want you to write complete blood count. Complete blood count. That's what CBC stands for. For those of you that may have been told that your blood level is low, that you are anemic, or you need to take iron pills, that is included in that complete blood count. Also, if you have an infection, it's going to show that your white blood cells are elevated. That's within the CBC, the complete blood count. Your red blood cells that we talked about, if you aggressively shake the tube and create hemolysis, red blood cells, it'll show your count of red blood cells that's in that CBC. So to explain it better, CBC is a most important test that you would get. Everybody would get a CBC at their physical. The doctor want to make sure what your blood level is, okay? The doctor want to be sure that if your white blood count come back high, okay, you got an infection somewhere in your body, and you probably just not showing symptoms right now. That's totally different from a blood culture. Remember, the culture is already noted that you have bacteria. They're trying to figure out what it is to cure it. But a CBC, if it does say that your white blood cells are elevated, it just let the doctor know something is trying to attack your body. They don't know what it is, okay? But a complete blood count. So in other words, think of the word. It lets the doctor know about your blood completely, all the components of your blood. Remember, we talked about hematology, the study of blood, because this is a complete blood count and it has all your functions of your blood. That goes to the hematology lab. I'm just adding to it. You don't have to remember it, but CBC goes to the hematology department of the lab. The study of blood. All of your blood component levels are in that CBC. Okay. Now, sedimentation rate is not drawn, the sed rate that I had you circle, it's not drawn on everyone. But for people that have like high lead levels, like lead poisoning or any type of other poisoning, the doctor will order a sed rate, basically level, to let the doctor know, okay, what's going on in the body in that way. Okay. It's not ordered on everyone, but on the test plan, the test wants to be sure that you understand what blood tube goes if the doctor orders a sed rate on his patient that may be having some type of lead poisoning. CBC, sed rate, and hemoglobin A1C. This H&H that you see right here in the middle, it stands for hemoglobin and hematocrit. If those are low, that's how the doctor's going to say you're anemic. But guess what? H&H is also included in the CBC. So when the doctor orders the CBC, he's ordering a complete panel of your blood. But if you are anemic and he don't want to check nothing else, and every month he have you come in, he may say, okay, Lauren, I want to run an H&H on you once a month just to check your levels. That means that he's not concerned about doing a CBC. He just want to focus on your H&H, hemoglobin and hematocrit levels. So the reason why I brought that up is because you may see H&H. I don't want you to be like nervous or alarmed about it. It still goes in your purple lavender top tube. But if you could think of H&H being anemic, which I've already explained that that's a part of your CBC, hopefully you can put it together. But it's not a most common test, but you could see it. So when I go here to my flashcard, same difference. I did a line diagonally, I'm sorry, not diagonally, but horizontally and vertically to where I made those 4 boxes again. I know I'm repeating myself, but I just want to be sure that you all understanding how I, am separating it for study use. So in my first box, I wrote lavender or purple. I know I put pink there, but I don't even want to talk about pink until Saturday, honestly. Okay, but I'll tell you about it later. So lavender and pink is in my first, lavender and purple is in my first box. Then my second box, I have the additive, which is EDTA. My third box, I have inversions 8 times. My fourth box, I have CBC for complete blood count. I have HGB-A1C for hemoglobin A1C, and then I have SAID rate. And then I have H&H down here because I have it a little separated. Until I need to bring it face front, I will. But I just have it there just to be introduced. Okay. Any questions about the EDTA tube, the lavender purple tube, which is 5th in the order of draw? All right. Let's go to number 6. 6 in the order of draw. Our gray top tube. It's not our urine culture tube that we did last week. This is our sodium fluoride potassium oxalate tube. But you could just remember it by oxalate. Remember, we saw a little powder substance in that tube. That's the oxalate. That substance is made of all of those words that, we said. Guess what? That tube is inverted 8 times to ensure proper mixing of additives with blood. You also see that is no clotting time required, meaning when you draw that blood will not clot in that tube. So the last 3 tubes in the order of draw, guess what we've noticed? There are no clotting time required, and they're all 3 are inverted 8 times. Okay. But I want you to go over to the most common test area. You see only one test right now. It says lactic acid on ice. I want you to highlight that because obviously it is important. But then this is you see it was 2018 that this form was made, but it's still the best form for me to teach. And I see other phlebotomy schools teaching from it, but it's an addition now since 2018. So I want you to write fasting glucose level somewhere right next to lactic acid. Rather it is a glucose level or a fasting glucose level, it goes in a gray top tube. So you heard me say in a CMP, it tells you your glucose level within that panel. But if the doctor just want to order a glucose level by itself, rather it's fasting or regular, it will go in your oxalate tube. So it's only 2 tests to remember for your gray top tube. Glucose level, rather it's regular or fasting, and then lactic acid on ice. If that is checked on your requisition and you draw it, it goes in your gray top tube on ice. So let me tell you, you're probably like, well, ammonia is on ice and that go on the green top tube because I need to be on the go. It's stat. But the lactic acid is not considered stat at all. It just needs to be on ice. So, I hope that makes sense. You make sure it's chilled, have an ice pack, but are not just going to be sitting on that and let the ice melt or the pack get warm. It's going to go to the lab, pretty quickly, but it's not considered to be a stat test, but it still needs to be on ice. Okay. Now, let me also explain something to you all. For example, the fasting glucose and the lactic acid all goes in a gray top tube, in one gray top tube. So it is okay to make sure that that gray top tube is with ice, even though the fasting glucose is with it. It's okay. Because remember, all these tests that I've just explained to you that goes in these tubes, you do not need multiple of the same color tube for these tests. You only need one tube, and all those tests can go in there. So for example, going back to the EDTA tube, our purple tube, I had you circle CMP, sed rate, and hemoglobin A1C. That doesn't mean that you need 3 purple tubes. You only need 1, because they're all are resulted from EDTA. And that's why it's 4 milliliters of blood in that tube. It's enough. So the lactic acid, even though it goes on ice, and the doctor probably also ordered a glucose level, then that means that gray tube goes on ice. Okay. Same thing for your green top tube. If the doctor orders an ammonia level and also ordered those stat tests, then that means you only need that 1 green, and all of it, that one that is going to go on ice. Okay. Now, let me tell you this. You're probably thinking, well, golly, one of the tubes, the citrate tube, we invert 3 to 5 times. The SS tube, we invert 5 times. And my last 3 tubes, which is my heparin, EDTA, and oxalate, we invert them 8 times. All right, so let me tell you. Remember, we look at the cup halfway full, never empty. And this is a scope of practice for phlebotomy. So let's just say you drew my blood, and according to the requisition of what the doctor ordered, you actually needed a blue top tube, a marble top tube, and a purple top tube. So you have 3 tubes that inversions are different. So the light blue top tube is 3 to 5. The marble tube, the tiger top tube, is 5. And then my purple top tube is 8. So the rule of thumb when you're inverting it, it's going to take all day for you to invert them tubes one by one, the amount of times it's supposed to be. So you will take all 3 tubes, invert them together 8 times. So what I'm saying is, it is proper scope of practice to invert your tubes. You can over invert them. You just cannot under invert them, if it makes sense. So if you have your citrate tube and the tube inversion is 3 to 5, you can't just say 1 and 2 because it wasn't inverted enough. Just for your purple top tube, it is inverted 8 times. You can invert it 10 times, but you can't invert it 5 times because it's under inverted. So back to the 3 tubes. Since the purple is the one that you would invert most, then just go ahead and invert, or put them all in your hand and invert them 8 times. Okay? Did I lose anyone about that? Now, when you're tested, it's going to ask you how many times you invert the blue tube, how many times you invert the oxalate tube. You do have to say 8 and all this. But in real life, you take them all of the inversions, or at the last inversion. Okay. Any questions regarding everything that I mentioned about the order of draw right now? You're probably thinking like now, okay, now that she said everything, I do see where maybe I need to study, and I think I feel like how I'm going to study them. So with the order of draw, you need to know per the color, the proper order of draw. You need to know per the additive, the proper order of draw. You need to know how many times to invert each tube. And you also need to be able to recognize what is the most common lab test associated with those tubes that the doctor will order. And I did give everything to you. According to how you know you learn for quicker pace, then that's what you would practice on your studies. So we have 6 things in the order of draw, 6 blood specimens in the order of draw. From the blood culture to the citrate, to the serum SST tubes, to the heparin, to the EDTA tubes, and the oxalate tube. Okay. Now at the bottom of my whiteboard here, I'm gonna make it bigger. You see these little tubes that you see here? They little micro. You can even see the word on the tube. It says microtainer. You see that they are in similar colors to the blood tubes that we just mentioned. Well, on Saturday, when we go over capillary sticks, these are basically the tubes that we use for the baby. When we have to stick them in their heels, the blood will free flow and drop in these tubes. And that's what we send to the babies, because remember, unless the baby is sick and have an IV in ICU, for infants, which is birth to 12 months, we do not do venipunctures on them. We stick their heels. So these are different from the vacutainers that we use for venipuncture. These tops actually screw off. And when we stick the baby heel, we put these microtainer right up to the heel and let the blood just continue to drop over and over and over in that microtainer until it fill up. And if you have multiple ones to do, then you have to put the top on it, get the other one, okay? That's if you work in the pediatric unit. Again, that's probably a little bit down the line when you even see babies like that. But these are called microtainer tubes. They're not called vacutainer tubes because they are not vacuums. You don't even use needles for these. Like I said, you use the lancets that we're going to do this weekend to stick the baby heel. Just imagine if you know a diabetic that take their blood sugar and the little needle they stick their fingers with, that's the same thing that you stick babies' heels with, and it goes in here. This is the only thing in real life lab that I do not have. I can't get my hands on it. So that's how come I have to show you a picture. They're very hard to come by, even for schools. Everything else I can order with my school account, but these, so I have to show you the picture. And these are real life. Now, one more thing I want to add. We just finished talking about the order of draw with the vacutainers. If you ever are in a position to where you do your infant sticks and you use these microtainers, they are of the same substance, meaning the purple lavender is EDTA, the green is heparin, the gold and the red are serum SST tubes, and the gray is oxalate. But because you're not using a needle, you don't have to worry about mixing the additive, because this blood is free falling from the infant's heel. So there is not an order of draw when you do capillary sticks on your babies when it comes to these tubes. Did I lose anyone on that? Now, in most cases, even in your book, if you were to do a capillary puncture and do these with the microtainers, a lot of phlebotomists and nurses like to do the EDTA first, because most of them in real life are bigger. So you see how it's a smaller, like the other ones of the purple, the lavender top tube, but really they're going away from the small EDTA tube because CBCs are in those, and it's about the blood count and all that stuff. So they are a little bigger. So most like to draw like for the blood, I don't want to say draw because you're not using a needle, but like to use the microtainer EDTA tube first. And then if the doctor orders anything else, then You can, it doesn't, it just doesn't matter what order you use. You do not see a blue top tube here, but there is a such thing as a blue top tube. Most of the time with infants do not have a problem with blood being too thick or thin. If they were born with a condition of such, it will be already noted in the embryo, like as the mom, when they take blood from you. But medical research always changes. So you just always be sure that when you're working, you stay abreast to the new information. And when your supervisor lets you guys know that things are changing and y'all have an in-service for it, just be sure to take heed, because things can always change. And they do in healthcare. Okay. So I did want to introduce this microtainer bottles to you all. And they're really that small, but it's only used for capillary punctures. It's not used with needles. Sometimes adults can be really, really, really hard to stick. And if they want to get a little bit of blood, sometimes the doctors will be like, well, just stick there, do capillary puncture. Let's just get it going. And we're going to use the microtainer tubes for it, but it's predominantly used for infants, for babies. Okay. Have you all, if you wanted to, took a screenshot of the whiteboard if you needed to, if you felt like it was something you want to do? I'll just want to put it here so you can screenshot it. I know it was a lot of information, but just like everything else, I do extend how I explain in detail, because I want to be sure that you pick it up. And remember, I already said the order of draw is the biggest challenging segment to be able to deliver and study. It's going to require you to study at home. Okay. All right, give me one moment. I don't have too much more to talk about because now my throat is dry and all that. Hold on for a minute. What did, oh, okay. I want to bring back up my whiteboard from Tuesday when I talked about medical terminology. Remember, it was the two top yellow sticky notes that I did not go over. So I want to go over that today. I remembered. Sometimes I kind of forget, but I think so. I'm waiting for it to load. Come on and load. Interesting. Hmm. Interesting. Oh, I don't know what's happening. Hmm. Let me undo it. Wow. Okay, y'all. Hold on. Okay, if it doesn't work, I just don't, why is it doing this to me? Okay, well, I don't want to just sit here and just look at it loading. I don't know what's going on because I just finished. Oh, Lord, I think there it goes. Jesus Christ. All right, it's starting to get there. Wow. Okay.